So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today online. I am Dr. Shaumil Waghela. I'm the Senior Manager for Medical Education for South Asia for Smith and Nephew, and I welcome you all to this revision hip arthroplasty web series. This web series is an extension of continued education events in arthroplasty and our commitments towards medical education. This concept of a unique virtual e-learning opportunity for surgeons to learn about our latest innovations in hip arthroplasty and hip reconstruction through orthopedic journey. This program is designed to learn from the experts on current trends and advances in revision hip arthroplasty. During this webinar, our well-renowned expert would be presenting complex cases and sharing his expertise and experience with discussions, deliberations on advances on RERAP, which is the revision hip system, and its current patient outcomes. Webinar attendees will have an opportunity to, to discuss with the faculty through interactive Q&A sessions, and you can type in your questions in the Q&A box, which you can see on your screen. Leading this webinar is none other than Dr. Mahesh Kulkarni. His name needs no introduction for the work he has done in knee and hip arthroplasty across the world. His commitment, passion, and enthusiasm in medical education is remarkable. He has been extremely forthcoming and helpful in putting through this scientific, technology-driven digital medical education initiative. Thank you, sir. Dr. Kulkarni is one of the most senior and well-renowned orthopedic surgeon in India and across the globe, and he hails from Pune with more than 20 years of clinical experience. He has performed several hip and knee replacement surgeries, including primary and revision replacement surgeries. He has performed significant number of surgeries for fractures of pelvis and acetabulum. This is where I believe his interest lies. He has been invited as a faculty for various national and international conferences on advances in joint replacement surgeries and treatment of pelvic and acetabular fractures. He is currently working as a senior joint replacement surgeon and specialist at Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, which is in Pune. And he has performed more than 2,000 hip and knee replacement surgeries in Pune, including the complex redo operations as well. He is actively involved in training junior surgeons because of his passion into teaching. As the faculty presents, all the viewers can submit their questions on the tab that you can see on your screen, which is the Q&A tab. And Dr. Kulkarni will address them during the session. So without taking more time, I would like Dr. Kulkarni to give his opening remarks and kickstart this meeting. Thank you so much. And Dr. Kulkarni, the stage is all yours.
So thanks a lot, Shaumil, for the very kind introduction. It's a privilege to present this webinar, and it's mainly focusing on revision hip scenarios. And today we're going to focus mainly on the femoral side. So we're not going to discuss too much about the acetabular revision side. So the structure that we made for us to go through in the next 45 minutes or so is we're going to talk about principles of revision hip replacement in general to begin with, followed by presentation on a stem that we're going to talk to you about. And then I'll show you a video for surgical approach, as well as the technical tips for exposure of the acetabulum and the technical tips for using the femoral stem. I'm more than happy to take questions as we go along. So you can just type your questions in the question and answer session, and I'll try and answer it as soon as I see it. So let's kickstart with the first presentation, which is going to be about principles of revision surgery. So let me just go back to the first slide. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, excellent. So we're going to talk about principles of revision hip replacement. So any successful revision hip replacement, it's not only excellent technique. You obviously need very good technique. You need good experience before you take on either a hip or a knee revision. But it also depends on the decisions that you make. You need to make sound decisions about your surgical approach, the choice of your implant that you're going to use, the fixation of that implant to the host bone, both on the acetabulum as well as the femoral side. And ultimately, you will realize that revision surgery is a trade-off between choices. You may love a certain kind of implant, but you may not be able to use it because the situation is, and the quality of bone or the cost of the implant itself may all limit the choices that you have in your armamentarium. So you need to be prepared to be able to take that decision. You will have a variety or a plethora of implants available to you, and then you need to successfully choose the ones, and I will take you through over the next 10 minutes on how to choose that implant. So pre-operative planning is obviously crucial. We need to understand that most of the decisions or critical decisions are made pre-operatively, and you should not rely on intraoperative inspiration. Nobody is going to come and save you in the operation theater if you haven't planned well. So make all the critical decisions pre-operatively, have plan A, B, C ready. So if you can't use plan A, have a plan B which is well thought and already prepared, and you've ordered the implants for that plan B or plan C as well. If possible, get 1:1 or 1:1.2 magnification X-rays pre-operatively and template these X-rays to understand the sizes of the implant that you might need. There's no point in suddenly getting cross on the operation table that the diameter of the implant that you need is going to be 24 and the company person has only provided you for a diameter of implant which goes up to 20. There's no point. You haven't done your homework, so you will end up in trouble. So have some idea of the size of implant that you might need during your surgery. You need to be prepared to understand what are the anticipated challenges during the surgery. Is there exposure is a problem, multiple scars around the hip joint is a problem, whether there is prosthesis which is sunk inside the femoral canal or there is protrusio of the acetabular side. You may not be able to dislocate the hip joint. So what is your plan going to be to take out those implants? So you need to be prepared for your surgical approach, your dislocation philosophy, your implant philosophy on both acetabulum and the femoral sides. So you need to define certain priorities. What are your priorities as you go through a revision surgery? So what is the first priority? So first priority is when you finish the operation, you should have gained secure implant fixation. So whatever implants you put in should be stable on day one intraoperatively, and you should be confident of getting and mobilizing that patient. If you're not, you need to explore possibilities to get it better intraoperatively. There is no point in praying postoperatively with a job which is not being done properly. Because a good clinical results ultimately depends upon patient not having any pain. And if you get a good secure implant fixation, patient is not or most probably not going to have much pain. So if you have a stable implant, there'll be less pain, patient will be happy and also avoid instability. So if you are doing a revision hip replacement and if you feel that the hip is not stable intraoperatively as you take it through a variety of hip movements, then you need to think and plan to get a stable hip done at the same time. So what is the second priority? You need to choose a form of reconstruction which is going to be sufficiently easy for you. So it should be technically easy for you and it should be consistent. So don't start using an implant which you've never seen in your life. So if you're using an implant, you should be familiar with all the technical aspects, all the varieties of offsets, lengths, diameters that implant offers you. And the surgical technique should be consistent. So you should be able to do the same steps every time and you should be able to get the same result each time by using that implant. So I think these are critical issues. The first priority was to get a good fixation, avoid instability. The second priority is a revision implant should be such that it should be technically easy for you to use and it should be reproducible, it should be consistent. So what is the third priority? You need to choose your surgical approach and your implant and plan them preoperatively. And you need to look at certain things, the implant that you choose and the surgery that you do or the surgical approach that you perform should preserve the soft tissues and bones. If you destroy the bone or the soft tissues at the time of your surgical approach or at the time of your implantation, you might burn all the bridges for future. You may not be left with anything if this is going to fail. And also, especially in Indian scenario, you need to avoid the trap of using inferior implants to preserve bone for the future. So if you use inferior implant and which is not technically indicated or right for that patient, you might land up into trouble in the future. So make sure that you don't burn your bridges for the future by using an implant which is going to be forgiving for you and is going to be long lasting for the patient as well. So what about surgical exposure? In surgical exposure, you need to have a preferred approach. My preferred approach for most of my revisions is a posterior approach. I find it is extensile. It gives me excellent exposure of the acetabulum. You can use cages or any reconstruction that you want to use it. Even in pelvic discontinuities, you can use a plate on the posterior column. So I find the posterior approach is much better in my hands. But people who are used to modified Hardinge approach or a trochanteric osteotomy, they should continue to use that approach if they are happy with the exposure that they are able to get. And another thing which I use very commonly is the extended trochanteric osteotomy. So in a revision scenario, there are particular indications for an ETO, but it facilitates stem removal and it improves acetabular exposure significantly. So in my hands, I usually don't hesitate to perform an extended trochanteric osteotomy if it is going to improve my exposure to a large extent. Now, once you taken a decision to perform a revision of that hip replacement, you need to think about whether or which implants you can retain and which need to be taken out, because you have a femoral component and your acetabular component. You might have planned your revision of one component, but how do you take that decision intraoperatively? You need to be prepared to revise both the components, but I'll take you through how to take that decision. If the implant is loose, it's a no-brainer. You have to remove it and revise it. So if it is loose, that there is no debate, you have to remove that implant. If you think that the critical matching parts cannot be fixed, I mean, imagine you have a fixed monoblock bipolar implant, which is cemented in place. You cannot just knock off the modular head and convert the acetabular side into a total hip. In this case, when there is a modular implant, you need to remove it. Or if there is a modular monoblock Charnley stem on the femoral side, which is well fixed, which is a 22 millimeter head, and you are planning to revise the acetabulum, and you suddenly understand that you have only 28 millimeter internal diameter on the acetabular side. In that case, the femoral head is not going to match to your acetabulum. And you need to plan to revise that hip because it's a non-modular component. If there is implant malposition, if the cup is in too much of anteversion, retroversion, if the cup is too open or closed, or if the femoral stem is in too much of anti or retroversion, or if the offset is not right on the femoral component, then you need to be prepared to remove that implant even if it is well fixed. When do we retain that implant? If it is well fixed, it is positioned well, and if it is functioning well, you don't need to revise it. And it should allow you to perform the operation. So if you have a femoral stem, you want to leave it behind, and you want to only revise the acetabulum. But unfortunately, the femoral stem, you are not able to displace it either anteriorly or posteriorly to have enough space for exposure of the acetabulum. In that case, you might have to knock off that femoral component and then be prepared to revise that component as well. So what are the general rules on the acetabular side? Although we are not going to discuss, I'm going to just briefly touch upon the acetabulum as well. You can retain a well-fixed acetabular component if you have a new liner available. If you're revising it for liner wear, you check with the company and see if that liner is available. So if you used a reflection cup 10 years ago and you want to just change the liner, make sure that the company is still manufacturing it and is able to give you that liner for that cup. And you make sure that the liner locking mechanism is functioning on the retained acetabular component. And if you implant a new insert, you need to make sure that it is going to be stable inside the acetabulum. Or if it's a large diameter uncemented socket, you can knock off the liner and you have option of cementing a liner inside. So you can put a cemented cup inside if the diameter of the retained acetabulum allows you to do so. And it has shown very good results, and Bill Harris has published a long series of these as well. If it's a cemented cup and there is no polywear, you can leave it behind. And if you can use a diameter of the femoral head along with that cemented cup which is retained, you can leave it behind. What about stem of the femur? If you can work around the implant to revise the acetabulum, you can leave the stem behind. If there is no distal osteolysis, and if the implant allows you to maintain the leg length and offset both at the end of the acetabular revision, you can leave it behind. And you should have compatible heads and acetabular liners for that hip itself. And you always need to think, do the benefits of implant removal justify the risk of implant removal? I mean, if you think that you're going to really destroy the femur while trying to take away a component, you may have to think twice. And if it is an older implant with suboptimal position or design, you need to remove it. And you can put a new implant in ideal position, allowing you to have good modularity of the femoral heads, including whether you want to use a ceramic head, oxynium head, or a good offset can be chosen by doing it. But the drawbacks are it is going to lead to more operative time. It is going to sacrifice bone. It might lead to intraoperative fractures, and you might end up having a miserable outcome. So make sure that you have taken that decision and have really thought about it before you go down that path. If the implant is retained, if it is on the acetabular side, make sure that the cup is stable. Just gently rock it and see whether it's going to move, as well as the stem. Make sure that both of them are absolutely stable. And how do I choose my implant? You need to use the implant which has given you longevity in various studies, which has shown that it is an excellent implant for that situation. So you need to have done your theory, understand which implants are going to work in your hand. Your ease of using it. As I said earlier, no point in using a fancy implant which you as well as the company assistant are both not sure about, or the company rep is not sure about. Try avoiding it. Ease of insertion. It should be an implant which can be reproducible, easily technically usable inside the operation theater. And as I said, it should be reliable. It should give you a consistent, reproducible surgical technique, and should give you the same stability each time that you use it. Take the hip through range of motion to make sure that your hip is stable at the end of the procedure, which can be dictated by the size of the head, version of the femoral, as well as the acetabular component, making sure your abductors are functioning and they're giving you good stability. And if necessary, keep constrained implant standby as well, because once you've done all of this revision work on the femoral, on the acetabular side, you might notice that the hip is very unstable, and you should have a constrained implant as standby. Soft tissue tension can be adjusted by maintaining the length of the femur. You can allow the femur to be left a little bit proud if you find that the hip has remained lax, or you can use a Kalkar building stem, or you can use long modular neck lengths to achieve stability. And also better to have stems which will allow you to have modular offsets. So you need to have stems which will come with high offset with modular neck length is completely gone now. So in a revision scenario, you don't have that extra interface at the stem and neck junction. So you just need to have stems which are available in both standard offset and high offset with modular head lengths. If you have poor abductors, if there is trochanteric non-union, or if there is a previous instability and you're revising it for that, I think a dual mobility option or a constrained implant is a good choice. So to win your surgery or improve your outcome in a revision hip surgery, know your enemy. The enemy here, I'm talking about your patient and their hip, the specifics of your patient and your hip. And then know yourself, know what are your abilities. Are you really able to do that complex operation? And can you do that revision without appearing in the Times of India the next morning? Because you don't want to create many problems by doing that. So make sure that you are confident, you are experienced enough. You need to understand the pathology and then start using the implant which is consistent, reproducible with a long history, which will give you a satisfactory outcome. So here, I think we've covered a little bit on the priorities on planning for a hip revision. This was mainly a theoretical talk. I can see there are a couple of questions. So let's see if I can answer one or two of them. So the first question is, where should we stop shoulder of the stem during the distal reamer? So the reamer comes up with etching marks for the length of the stem which is available. So you will have a stem length which is 190, around 225, 260, and 300. So there'll be a mark which I'll be able to show you during the time of video presentation, and you need to calculate how far distally do you want to go beyond the original stem to get the ability to have a diaphyseal fixation. So that again, I will re-answer it at the time of video as well. So the second question is, how do we decide the version of the stem while inserting the Redapt implants? Redapt is a cylindrical stem. So you do a trial reduction with a trial stem, take the hip through most of the vulnerable positions, which again, I'll show you during the video, and make sure you are happy with that anteversion. Usually the anteversion is determined by the position of the leg or the distal femoral condyles and not dependent on the shape of the cut femoral neck, which usually is not there in revision surgery or the lesser trochanter. So I take the leg position and then you mark the trial with the anteversion, take the hip through variety of hip vulnerable positions. And if you are happy, that is going to be your final version. But because it's a cylindrical stem, you can really rotate the version in through 360 degrees. The specific method for reaming. The question is, osteoporotic bone, the distal reamers are taking away a lot of bone. How should we avoid it? So basically, I tend to use hand reaming. Lots of young surgeons might find it boring, but I find it is safe because I also understand whenever there is good cortical contact, and I go in a very stepwise fashion, start with the smallest reamer and gradually go on increasing the diameter of the reamer till you find that you are really comfortable with the depth as well as the diameter of insertion. So I ream line to line. I'm again going to explain at the time of the Redapt presentation of the technical details. Do we have high offset revision stems is the question. With Redapt, you get two options. So you have a standard offset and your high offset. So yes, we have both the offset options which are available in India with us for the Redapt stem. So let me just see. How does monoblock stem help in DDH hip? So if you're performing a hip replacement for DDH, you need to have modularity where, and especially if you're doing a subtrochanteric femoral shortening osteotomy, the stem of choice for me is different. I will probably use a stem which is modular like SROM stem, but you can easily do it with a Redapt-like stem, which I have done. So if you have a conical monoblock fluted stem, which is like Redapt, you can easily do a shortening trochanteric femoral osteotomy as well. The next question is how to decide indications for constrained versus dual mobility options. And can we say that dual mobility is better than constrained prosthesis? Yes, of course, dual mobility is better than constrained because dual mobility will have less strain on the implant and bone interface. So hopefully it's going to be a long history. It will probably improve the longevity of the implant itself. If there are no abductors, if the trochanter is in non-union, then I think you need to be prepared. So the first choice will be dual mobility and the second choice will be a constrained implant. I always, the next question is whether you should use a C-arm. I like to have a C-arm in the operation theater when I'm using a diaphyseal fixation stem. It doesn't harm you. Do you routinely advocate H2O for cement mantle removal or prefer cement in cement? Now, when do I prefer cement in cement? If the cement mantle is absolutely fine and there are no cracks in the cement mantle, yes, you can go ahead and use a cement in cement implant. The caveat is you should have a collarless, polished, tapered implant, which can go and fit inside that existing cement mantle for you to perform that procedure. If you don't have that implant with you, it is better to take that cement out either by endofemoral approach. So you can look inside the canal, use your chippers and splitters and take the cement out. Or if the cement is quite well preserved and goes quite distally, then I would not hesitate to perform an extended trochanteric osteotomy. Any relation of femoral head and acetabulum size? No, the femoral head size is usually dictated by the acetabulum. So if you have a socket which is say 48 or 50, at the most you can go is to up to 28 or 32 head. Above 52, you can go for a 36 millimeter head. So the acetabulum socket will dictate what is the maximum head size that you can use. So some surgeons, the question looks to be specific to REDAP. Some surgeons face a problem when attaching the trial body to the distal reamer. Any tips to overcome this challenge? Yes, sometimes initially you will notice that in REDAP you can, there are two reamers, one is a distal reamer and one is a proximal reamer. So once you finished your distal reamer, you have to use a proximal reamer which threads onto the distal reamer, and then you take the proximal reamer away and the proximal body actually threads on to the distal reamer as well. And sometimes it becomes difficult for you to get it aligned. In those cases, I have very rarely taken out the distal reamer, assembled the hip proximal body and the distal reamer, and then gradually reinserted it using hand and not much of force, which will give you an alignment idea with the REDAP stem. So looks like we finished most of the questions. I think Vaibhav has now asked me. Excessive medialized cemented cup. Do we need allografts that time? So if you have a protrusio situation and you have a cup which is medialized and there is weakening of the floor of the acetabulum, yes, you need bone graft. We are fortunate to have our own fresh frozen bone grafts, which have given excellent results. We've really used it in nearly 45 patients now with long-term results, and the medium-term results are good. So you need to have bone graft, no doubt about it. So what are the specific points to be added in revision consent? And best approach for revision, we're going to talk it at the time of video presentation. So the best consent that I always take is infection. So if in a standard hip replacement, 1% risk of infection is there, in a revision scenario, I would suggest that it's about 5 to 8%. I will always take a consent for sciatic nerve palsy, which is around 3% in a revision scenario. I will take a consent for intraoperative fractures, which might compromise post-operative weight bearing. I will also take consent for abandoning the procedure if we open it up, even if the ESR CRP is normal. In certain cases, you might open it up and notice that there is pus. So you should have taken a consent for 2-stage revision or even for an implant spacer. You need to tell the patient that they might be off the weight bearing for nearly 3 months, and risk of dislocation we've already discussed, nerve injuries, bleeding, hematoma, embolism, DVT all remain the same. So I have a question from a senior surgeon, Dr. Deepak Dave. Hi, dual mobility for instability issue is good, and is it worth in young patient primary hip for getting more movements? Now, this is a question which is, I'm getting patients who have been, unfortunately, been gone to youngish patient, which have been advised to have a dual mobility hip so that they can squat on the floor. I'm still a little bit skeptical, although we don't have enough research on it. I would still avoid using a dual mobility bearing in a young patient because I feel that the surface area of the polythene is much high, which is going to rub against the metal. And there are concerns of having a lot of wear of that polythene because the surface area being big, and also some chances of metallosis. So I'm still not using it in youngish patient, but some surgeons have already started using it, obviously marketing it well as well, because the patients come and ask me as well. So my indications for dual mobility, again, Dr. Dave has asked me, is if the abductors are weak, if there is trochanteric non-union, say if I'm doing a hip replacement following removal of a failed DHS or a failed PFN, where the greater trochanter has not united, in that case, I'll go for a dual mobility. If I'm revising it in an elderly patient, say 75, 80, 85, elderly lady, I would go for a dual mobility because the risk of dislocation is less. If I'm doing a revision for in a patient who's got some neurological or neuromuscular problems, including Parkinson's, then I would go for a dual mobility hip. These are the specific indications that I'm using. Any complex revision, I will keep a dual mobility handy because the risk of dislocation is significantly less. So how do I check my cup orientation intraoperatively? I will show you. I use the transverse acetabular ligament as a landmark, and the video has part on the acetabular positioning, so we'll talk about it as well. Routine preoperative CT scan for revision, I think, is a very good idea. I always use it to understand what is the extent of osteolysis, if there are any breaks in the columns. So I definitely need to always order a CT scan for a revision of a hip joint. And how long should be the extended trochanteric osteotomy? Now, ETO, you need to decide what stem are you going to use. You need to preserve the diaphysis, because if you're using a diaphysial fixation stem, you can't go, we have an X-ray in the video, which I will pause and show you how to make that decision for the length of the ETO as well. So looks like we've answered most of the questions, so we can probably move on with the next presentation, which is the REDAPT presentation. So let me bring that up. And you can ask me questions as we go along. Can you see the REDAPT presentation now? I just need somebody to tell me if we can see the REDAPT presentation.
Yes, we can, Dr. Kulkarni.
Yeah, okay, then we will carry on with that. There are a few questions which are piling on, but maybe we can...
I think we can answer it after this presentation.
So let's move on with the next. So the stem that we're going to talk about is the REDAPT femoral solution. As I said, I'm not going to talk about the acetabular solutions now. So we have two types of stems which are available to us. We either have a cylindrical porous coated stem. We all know which ones these are, but I will tell you, although we should not be mentioning product names. So we have solution stem. We have Echelon, which is marketed by Smith & Nephew. And Zimmer also makes one which is not available in India, is the Porocoat. So these are cylindrical, long stems which are made up of cobalt and chromium, and they are extensively porous coated. So that is one type of stem. And the second one, which is the tapered fluted monoblock stem. So it can be either a monoblock stem or it can be a bi-body stem, meaning it can be a modular stem. So the monoblock, which has given excellent results, is the Wagner stem and the REDAPT stem. And these are made up of titanium. So because these are made up of titanium and their modulus of elasticity is closer to the bone, the thigh pain that we get in cobalt chrome stems is much higher. So these stems, the monoblock titanium stems, will have less thigh pain. And they will also be less stress shielding, and they will promote bone formation in the proximal femur as compared to the cylindrical cobalt chrome stems. The cylindrical cobalt chrome stems, most of you might have used it, are a little bit difficult to use, and they have more risk of intraoperative fractures because they are bulky and they are not user friendly. Whereas these conical stems, which taper down as they go distally, will have less risk of intraoperative fractures, and these are probably better tolerated, and in my hands they have given excellent results. And if you see the indication range, if you follow the Paprosky classification, the tapered fluted stem can, I'm sure it can be definitely used in 3B, but it can also be used sometimes in a patulous femur in a type 4, whereas the cylindrical is limited up to size 3A. So you should have an isthmus of at least 5 centimeters for a cylindrical stem to be used, whereas a tapered fluted stem can be used even a shorter isthmus is available. If it's a type 4, I will still go for something like a tumor prosthesis or something which allows me distal locking and takes away the pressure of hanging on with a tapered fluted stem. Now, the tapered fluted design is not new. The original Wagner has given excellent results. As you can see here, the survivorship at 18 years is nearly 93.8. It allows you bone on growth on those implants, which have been excellent. And it has got these flutes and also has got the splines. The initial criticism for the Wagner kind of design was the subsidence, because the surgeons were a little bit wary, so they might be undersizing it, and the stem subsided over a period of time, which led to dislocation, shortening, and problems. And also dislocation because it had a pretty valgus angle at the stem neck junction. So the offset was much lesser, and that was the reason I think the dislocation was a major problem with the original design. Now they have changed the design as well. They have gone to a much better medial offset, and the surgeons are now familiar. So I think both of these complications are pretty much unheard of. So some surgeons then decided that because Wagner was dislocating more and it probably wasn't getting any metaphyseal fixation, they thought of modularity. So you wanted to achieve stable distal fixation, but you should have a body which can be exchanged to give you different offsets, which will both compensate for leg length as well as reduce your chances of dislocation. So this was marketed as a cure for unpredictable fixation. Unfortunately, these stems are not being used extensively because of problem of an interface which is now added at the junction of the stem and the body. So two problems: you can create tranionosis at the taper, but you can also have tranionosis at the body and the stem junction. And also there are certain implants which are breaking at this junction. So I think all of that has led to the bi-bloody stem philosophy now gradually being put away. I've already explained these complications to you. So either a breakage of the implant or fretting and corrosion leading to tranionosis are the problems. So what do we want? You want good predictable distal fixation. So you want good diaphyseal fixation. You should be able to restore the offset to reduce the dislocation, reduce the corrosion by avoiding any junctions, extra junctions that are not necessary, simplifying the procedure or technique of the surgery itself, and you should not have any compromise on option. So what is the redapt stem? So basically, you get the redapt stem in two offset options. I'll explain to you as well. So a standard offset and a high offset. You have a surface which allows you reliable distal fixation. So it has got a 3-degree taper angle, which is a conical implant, which will wedge in even if it subsides. As I said, it can be used up to type 3B definitely. Type 4, I'm a little bit wary about. It is available in 3 stem lengths and still distal fixation depths. And it's a very reproducible technique. And it has got these splines which will allow you rotational control as well as allow some bony ingrowth as well as the on growth onto it. And there is another stem. So there are 2 types of stem. One is a standard redapt, which doesn't have an additional sleeve here for metaphyseal fixation. And there is another one which you can slide the sleeve onto this taper junction here, which is again coated, allowing you to restore any proximal bone loss if necessary. In my view, it is not required. I wouldn't bother with this because the stem itself is so good that it will give you reproducible proximal bone formation and avoid stress shielding because of the nature of the stem itself. So what stability, how can we achieve stability with this stem? As I told you, you have this increased taper angle and a spline geometry which is quite broad. So you have 2 types of splines on this stem. One is a major spline and one is a minor spline. Both of them will give you axial and rotational stability. And they have this grid blasting technique, which is now called as patented Roctite flutes, which will allow you to get good amount of bony ingrowth and outgrowth. So these splines, along with the taper geometry, will allow you to get better fixation and long-term fixation with this stem. What about adaptability? As I told you, it will give you 360-degree freedom because it's a cylindrical, it's a conical stem. You can rotate the version as you want after the trial reduction. It will give you 2 offsets, so standard offset and a high offset neck. So 12 to 15 diameters, you can see the offset goes up to 45. And if you want to use the bigger diameters, offset can be increased quite significantly. So it can cover majority of the offset options that you may have to use intraoperatively. The one with sleeve, as I said, I'm not using it. We are using mainly the sleeve one without sleeve. I don't want this modularity. And 190 to 300, we've got these diameters and stem lengths for us. And the two offsets are available for us as well. So the 190 comes in diameters from 12 to 21, both standard and high offset. The 240 again will come in the diameters. It's quite significant advantage. It goes up to 27. I need to check what diameter is available for us in India. And the 300 one again goes to diameter from 12 to 27, both available in standard and high offset. And you've already seen the chart of high offset with a standard neck. What is the neck length you're going to get. And as you go along with the head, which is +5 or +7, again, you can increase the offset to an extent. Now, because the stem is conical, it can be accommodated quite nicely, even if there is a femoral bow. So that is a big option. So you don't need a board implant. You don't have to have too much of inventory. You can just use a straight implant. If you want to use a 240 implant or a 300 implant, I will always perform an ETO. Because it is a straight stem that you're trying to put it in a board femur, and if you don't have an ETO, unfortunately, this will perforate or it will break the proximal femur. So for a 190 length stem, you can avoid an ETO, but if you are going to use a 240 or 300, depending on your preoperative planning, don't hesitate to do an extended trochanteric osteotomy. I would rather go in for an extended trochanteric osteotomy straight away. What about reproducibility? The technique is very easy. As I said, you go with the starter reamer and then you go to the distal reamer. And this is the, somebody had asked me the question, what should be the depth of reaming? So this mark will tell you if you want to use a 190 stem. Once this mark comes to the level of the greater trochanter, that is where the depth of your insertion is going to be. And then you leave this distal reamer in place, go with the proximal reamer, again that mark coming up to the tip of the trochanter. And then you take the proximal reamer out, the distal reamer stays in place. You use either a standard offset or a high offset depending on the patient height, preoperative templating, length of the, check it with the tip of the trochanter, and then use your modular heads to achieve intraoperative hip stability. So all of this modularity can be used. Now, what if you have done an ETO? So before you made the ETO, you should check what is the length of your ETO. So if you have an 11 millimeter ETO, then you need to put this distal reamer in. Once the distal reamer is gone, use a scale from the ETO, and the mark for the body should be at 11 centimeter from the ETO itself. So always have to use a scale if you have performed an ETO to check how much has the reamer become proud, because the trochanter will have been moved to the side. So you won't be able to tell you from the trochanter. So the instruments are very easy, just these two reamers and a trial of the body, and that's it. So this is an example of a case that I'm going to show you. The problems are, there is a little bit of protrusio, there is little bridge of bone here. The hip is nearly sunk in, the stem is sunk in. This is probably, I can't see whether there is cement here. Probably an uncemented stem. You can see a pedestal formation here. The bone is extremely thin. Now, how do I decide the length of my osteotomy here? So whenever I'm using a stem, which is a conical stem, I have a long X-ray, which unfortunately is not included in this presentation. I'll calculate the distance from the tip of the trochanter to an area where I want to make the osteotomy. Beyond that osteotomy, I should at least have 6 centimeters of intact diaphysis, which is going to give me good purchase of the stem. Now here the indication of osteotomy is not to take out the cement. It is because the dislocation is going to be very tricky. You will not have any exposure. As soon as you make a posterior approach, you will see that this trochanter is abutting on the acetabular edge, and you will not be able to dislocate this hip joint. So the best thing is to do an ETO, improve your exposure of the acetabulum, and then try and dislocate the hip joint. So make sure that your ETO is marked. You have enough distal length for your diaphyseal fixation. Have a cable beyond your ETO before you start preparation. So before I start the video, do you have any questions? Let me just check. I somehow can't open the questions. Okay. So let's move on with the video. I can't somehow see the questions. So this is the patient that we have discussed just now. Here is the longish sort of an X-ray to tell me how much of intact diaphysis I have. So I need to preserve this diaphysis. I have done a posterior approach, standard posterior approach. Always make sure that you develop a plane between the fascia and the muscle, the vastus lateralis muscle. Here you are tagging the posterior short external rotators. This part is superior, this is inferior, this is vastus lateralis here. I always in a hip replacement start infiltrating as I'm going around, which will reduce the bleeding. So the cocktail is same as that we use in the knee joint. Stay close to the trochanter. Make sure that you have identified, palpated the sciatic nerve. You don't have to dissect it every time. Stay on the bone, but make sure you have a thick flap to repair at the end. This is the trochanteric overgrowth, which doesn't allow you to see the joint at all. So you need to take precautions, make sure that you are cleaning up and releasing all along the femur so that you can start gradually seeing any rotation. Now you can see the hip is seen, but I'm not able to dislocate it. And if you try and dislocate it, you'll fracture it. So now I'm going to plan my ETO. I measured it, marked my distal end, and the vastus lateralis has been slid to the side. This is anterior, this is posterior. So I'm marking the osteotomy plane with a drill bit, a little bit 2 or 3, 4 holes anteriorly. Distal limb we have done. And then we also mark the osteotomy along the posterior edge coming right up to the calcar region here. This on the left side is superior of the screen. On the right side is the inferior. So I use a small saw blade to complete the osteotomy at the distal aspect, and then use a medium-sized blade to continue taking the osteotomy towards the calcar itself. And I would not take it right to the edge of the distal limb. I'll show you, I use a burr there so that we don't leave any stress risers. So we're using a burr to round off the osteotomy at the distal end so that you don't leave any cracks which are going to propagate as you start reaming. So once you've done the burring of the corners and made sure that your osteotomy is complete, use broad osteotomes, couple of broad osteotomes along the length, and gently lever up, and you haven't actually broken onto the anterior cortex itself. And you can see the entire stem is now visible. Clean it up, take all the membrane away, and then you can easily dislocate. Your acetabular exposure suddenly becomes massive. You can take all the membrane out from the ETO itself, and then you can easily dislocate the hip joint without actually breaking the femur. So let me see if I can answer the questions till this stage. Why would I not be able to see the questions? I don't understand. Okay, they were on a different page. So question is how to avoid the subsidence, because the Wagner stem have subsidence up to 20%. So subsidence should be avoided by using exact technique of reaming. So make sure that you should have a technique which gives you good intraoperative purchase at the time of the surgery itself. There's no point in reaming extra and leaving the stem not fixing very well. So I think exacting technique is the only thing which will avoid subsidence. If you undersize the stem, you are going to get subsidence. Dr. Dave is asking me whether there is any preoperative CT scan. No, preoperative CT scan was not done in this case because there was no acetabular revision involved in this case. So because there was no acetabular revision, I was not expecting much of acetabular wear. So unless there is an acetabular revision involved, I wouldn't get a CT scan unless there is a different problem. Does the sleeve give proximal stability? The sleeve will give you additional fixation in the proximal metaphyseal area, but I don't think you can use it to rely for your fixation. I think your fixation is mainly diaphyseal. So the proximal porous coating will only allow you to get a little bit of bony in growth, but stability will not be a major advantage with the sleeve. The largest distal diameter available in India, I need to check with the company rep. As far as I understand, it's 24 or 25. The question is, does it give both rotational stability and axial stability? 100% of the times, it will give you rotational as well as axial stability. So absolutely no doubt about that. Because of the flutes itself, it will give you rotational stability, and the axial stability is achieved by the tapering nature as well as the reaming technique that you have used. What is the difference between Wagner SL and Redapt conical stem? I think two differences. The taper on the Wagner is around 2 degrees. So it's a gradual taper as compared to Redapt, which is 3 degrees, which allows you more conical nature of the stem, allowing you better stability. Diameters, Wagner is only, although it is available to 24, the company person has never kept the diameter more than 19, which you tend to need. The splines are different. The splines depth is different in Redapt as compared to Wagner. The Wagner splines are much smaller. Intraoperative fluoroscopy, yes, you should use it. There's no point in perforating the femur or shattering the femur to avoid. So I think you need to use intraoperative fluoroscopy. Dr. Sachin Firke, good to see you here. Sometimes the entire femur cavity is filled by cement because of slippage of cement restrictor. Oh, that is a difficult problem. I have got special long drill bits, which I can't show you here. And burrs, they are available locally by JJ company in Kerala. So they have these burrs. So you need to make a drill in the center of the cement plug and then use these widen the small gradually increasing burrs in diameter to actually make a hole for about 1 centimeter. Then you use a splitter and chipper to take that 1 centimeter of cement. And then you have to gradually proceed. Sometimes it has taken me 3 hours to take that out. The stem does not, somebody has asked me a question whether it has an anterior bow. No, this stem does not have an anterior bow. It's a straight stem. Dr. Navre from Kolhapur, what's your indication for Calcar replacement prosthesis? I haven't really bothered with the Calcar replacement prosthesis. So if I'm using a diaphyseal stem, I don't worry about Calcar replacement by adding a little bit of metal onto it. If you use a titanium stem, as I've said to you before, and if you close the ETO down, you will get good bone forming. There are enough reports with Wagner showing you that the bone formation is very good in the proximal femur. So I don't think it will add a lot. My indications for accepting a high hip center, usually I accept a high hip center in a case of a DDH where good bone is in Crow type 1 or type 2. When the good bone, you need to chase the good bone. And if the good bone is slightly proximal, if you are within 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter higher than the teardrop, that is acceptable. But make sure that you are medial and higher. If you leave the hip center lateralized and higher than 2 centimeters from the inferior edge of the teardrop, the failure risk is going to be very high. Redapt cost, again, I'm not sure. We probably need to talk to your local Smith & Nephew rep. So the cost answer I can't give. What is the advantage of 16 splines? More the merrier, more the splines, more the purchase on the bone, more axial stability, more chances of bone for on growth and onto the stem itself. Level of ETO we've talked about. You need to preserve bone for fixation. So make sure that you leave some diaphysis behind for the stem that you're using. At least 5 to 6 centimeter of intact diaphysis should be left behind. And even if you are tempted to perform a longer ETO to take all the cement out, don't do it because you will compromise the diaphysis and you will not be able to use this stem. Do you fix the osteotomy? No, I will answer it when we play the video later on. Anytime you use TBW for wiring, yes, always. We will show you in the next slide. shoulder of the stem, use level of shoulder of the stem should be at the tip of the trochanter. So if you don't have the tip of the trochanter because of the ETO, you should measure it. You should measure the amount of ETO from the tip of the trochanter beforehand, and that is the length you should leave the shoulder from the level of the osteotomy to recreate the center of rotation of the hip joint. You can use this stem for dysplastic. Can we use this stem for dysplastic hips? Yes, you can use it because the anteversion can be really adjusted where you want. However, the smallest stem length is 190, so which might be a little bit longer for some of the dysplastic hips. So you might want to use a different stem. I always prefer to use, question is whether to use a monoblock or modular. I prefer to use a monoblock because the cost is much lesser as compared to a modular, and the monoblock serves my purpose. And the answer from the company rep is we have Redapt stem, which is available till 27 millimeter in diameter. So I think we have covered most of the questions. So now we will go ahead with the technique of acetabular exposure as well as using the Redapt stem itself. So once you've taken the stem out, see what was the length of the stem to determine whether you want to go bypass the tip of the stem by using either 190 or a 240 stem. So I'm releasing the medial aspect of the femur here. If you don't release this and rotate the femur, and if it is completely stuck, you will get a fracture of the shaft of the femur. It happens very easily. This I'm using a curette to take away all the membrane from the femoral canal. And now we've exposed the acetabulum. This is the superior end. This is the inferior end. So we have two homons. The femur is displaced anteriorly. I am standing on the posterior side. So my hand is posterior side of the hip joint. Then I use, let me just pause it here. I use one homon anterior to the transverse acetabular ligament and one homon here which is posterior to the transverse acetabular ligament. And if you ream in between those two reamers, you are going to remain parallel to the transverse acetabular ligament, and that will allow you to get the version right. And then make sure that you take out all the membrane. So the initial reaming, and then I'm carefully now only reaming to the mouth of the acetabulum itself. Because in a revision scenario, you don't want to break the rim in this case where we are converting from a bipolar. This is a trial cup. Let me just show you now. This is the posterior homon. This is the anterior homon where the tal is. The handle should remain in between those two because the tal will be here. Now, this is superior and this is inferior. If the inferior edge of the socket, the inferior edge of the trial, if it is too much underneath the tal, boundary of the tal, that means my cup is too closed. If the inferior edge of the cup is prouder than the tal, that means the cup is too open. So I think that will give you both inclination as well as the anteversion issues to be sorted out. With the reflection or an R3 cup, I always use line-to-line reaming. So if I use 56 reaming, I will use a 56 trial. And if the 56 trial fits perfectly well, I go for a 56 final cup as well. Because the final cup, especially with R3, which is the advanced coating, will be slightly thicker than the standard cup. And I would suggest to ream line-to-line for these cups. And the screw should be in the posterior-superior quadrant, so that we can get a good amount of bone fixing. This is the cup which has already been put in. In a revision scenario, I'll use at least 2 or 3 screws to achieve and complete my fixation. So again, we want to move on. Unfortunately, in this video, the Redapt technique was cut short by the person who has made the video for me. So, but we have still covered a lot of it. We have covered the ETO, and I'll also show you how to close the ETO. So once the screws are put in, we use a trial liner with a hood, which is posterior superior. And then I use one cable. Before I start reaming, I will use a cable distal to the osteotomy because that will prevent any crack propagation. Once I start reaming, you don't want this, with this fragile piece of bone to shatter away, because if it starts fracturing distally, you are going to run into deep problems. So always have a prophylactic cable just within a centimeter of the distal limb of the ETO, so that you don't get any crack propagation. And then you start reaming. I'm not, as you can see, I'm not rotating the hip. Use a C-arm at this step because you will have a pedestal. So use a long drill bit to make sure that you are perforated the pedestal at the tip of the stem and you are into the canal of the femur. And then you start reaming. So that is where I was hitting. So this is, I'm calculating. So just a moment, let me go a little bit. So this is a scale and I'm calculating the mark from the ETO side. So if I had done a 13 centimeter ETO, my shoulder mark from the reamer should be at 13 centimeter from the ETO, and you need to constantly check it as you're reaming in a situation like an ETO. And this is the black mark, as you can see. This should be at the level of the tip of the trochanter if there is no ETO, or this should be at the level from the distal limb of ETO where the length of the ETO is known to you. So I use a hand reamer, and then once I've done proximal reaming, you are not going to need much of proximal reaming here because you've done an ETO. And then you have this modular sleeve which goes on top of the distal reamer. And then there are ratchets here so that you can change your antiversion in the proximal area. And then you can use either a standard offset or a high offset on this body itself. So you can do variety of indications. You can dial in the version by loosening this screw. You can use a standard offset or a high offset. So all of that can be done on the foundation of the distal reamer itself. So this is the screw which has been tying. I'm using a standard offset, as you can see. And then I use a trial head, make sure that I have got good stability of the hip joint. So, and before I put the final stem, what I've done is I've put in the wires around the proximal femur. So I've got 2 wires around the ETO and the proximal femur because that makes my life much easier. And then I start inserting the stem. I can still control the rotation. So I'm watching from the top, seeing my leg position and adjusting my version. And I've already marked the version with the trial itself. And this stem, I will tell you, is it gives you a fantastic rigid fixation. So make sure that your trial was inserted to a proper depth because this stem will remain a little bit prouder than the trial. So maybe a couple of millimeters, 3-4 millimeters prouder than the trial. So always get your trial sinking in a little bit. Make sure that you do a trial reduction with a plus head so that once you insert this stem, because this remains proud, you would have some length to use a minus head. Then again, I will do a trial reduction with the final stem in place and take the hip in extension and external rotation, followed by flexion at 90 degrees, adduction and internal rotation. We've used the oxinium head here. Reduce the hip joint, get your ETO closed, and you can see the ETO will be closed quite nicely. And then repair the vastus lateralis here. This is the intraoperative image intensifier view of the stem, making sure that you are within the femur and have not shattered it. So I think that completes the video demonstration for us as well. And now we will see if we have any questions, further questions that we have. Does this stem have any suture holes like we have with Wagner is the question. Let me just rewind it for you so that you can see for yourself. So it doesn't have any suture holes. So you have to rely on fixation with tension band wiring. The next question, what would have been your level of osteotomy if it would have been cemented stem and cement about distal 2 centimeters of tip? I don't ever go chasing the cement right till the end. If you do that, you cannot use a diaphyseal fixation stem. So the osteotomy level should be leaving at least 5 to 6 centimeters of diaphysis intact beyond the osteotomy if you want to use this kind of a stem. The role of small fins again is to give you increased surface area for bone on growth. Obviously, if the long fins are engaged, and the bone loss could be geographic in nature. So sometimes you might engage with a long fin. In some areas, you might engage with a small fin, but it increases the surface area. The next question is, do you use rigid flexible reamer or flexible reamer while femoral preparation? No, I don't use a flexible reamer unless there is an indication. Unless the femoral canal was very tight, then I would start with a flexible reamer. But otherwise, for redapt stem, you always start with a rigid reamer. And these are very sharp and come with a very small diameter. So there is absolutely nothing to worry about. What are the risks in dual mobility? The dual mobility per se, if it is dual mobility cup, which is like the old generation resurfacing cup, then the risk is that you may not bottom out with the cup itself. You never are able to see whether the cup is bottomed out, and the chances of fracture are slightly higher with those kind of cup. But if it is a modular dual mobility cup like the Stryker one or the Zimmer one, then you can actually see through the screw holes. You can use screw holes for additional fixation and then use the liner, metal liner. In youngish patient, as I've said, I'm not very sure about the durability or longevity of a dual mobility cup. And just to give them increased range of mobility, I wouldn't change my bearing from a ceramic on poly or oxygen on poly. Acetabular protrusions of acetabulum. When do we use a cage? If there is massive bone loss leading to, say, cavitatory defects which are not allowing you to get any rim fit. So anytime you have a situation where you have pelvic discontinuity, you need to use a cage. When do we use a curved long femoral stem? Now the curved long femoral stems are available in solution and Echelon. But as I've told you earlier, I don't like using a cobalt chrome stem. And that is why I don't use a long curved femoral stem in my revisions now. Apart from a stem like Reef, which has got distal locking. And because it is so long in length, you need to use a curved stem. SROM versus Redapt, the indications are completely different. Somebody asked me what is the difference between SROM and Redapt. Redapt is a diaphyseal fixation stem. SROM is mainly a metaphyseal fixation stem. So you need to have good bone proximally. SROM is much more modular as compared to Redapt. You also need to have a tight fitting distal stem with SROM as well. But the indications are completely different for me for both these stems. Do you always prefer Dall-Miles cables or use regular stainless steel encircler wires? The Dall-Miles cables are expensive. I like them. The SS cables, I'm worried sometimes that the quality of the SS cables may not be consistent. They can break. The autoclaving with a wooden spool is sometimes doubtful. So I think I prefer cables if the patient is affordable. If he's not, then I would go for SS wires. Absolutely no problem. You can make a double loop SS wire at one level so that you get better fixation. If there is bad protrusio and you are not able to visualize TAL, how do you decide the version of the acetabular cup? In that case, you have to rely on whatever landmarks are available inside the acetabulum, but the patient positioning here will play a crucial role. Especially in revision hips, you need to chase good bone. So your version will then depend on the patient position. So getting the handle perpendicular to the floor and then bringing it down to 45 degrees of inclination and around 15 to 20 degrees of anteversion. This is a tapered stem. So can we really change the version as much? The version can be changed in a tapered stem as much as you want. So absolutely no doubt whether you can change the version. Minimum offset of Redapt stem, it was there in the presentation. I can't remember. So the standard offset with the minus head It probably was 35. I will check and let you know. How much length of stem should be beyond distal extension of HTO? So for a conical stem like Redapt or Wagner, you should at least have 6 or 7 centimeter, minimum 7 centimeter of stem beyond the ETO. Whereas Echelon or solution stem, which is a cylindrical stem, you can rely on 4 to 5 centimeter distal to the ETO. Why long in conical stem? Because the distal part of the stem is so narrow that it doesn't take really any part in fixation. Next question. Do you prefer cemented revision femoral component? Unfortunately not, because if you want to use a cemented revision femoral component, you should have bone graft and you should perform impaction grafting, because once you've removed the stem, the femoral canal will be devoid of any cancellous bone. So if you use cement, it is not going to have any interdigitation with the cortical bone. So that fixation will fail. So if you want to use a cemented stem for your revisions, you should have bone graft and you should be able to do impaction grafting. Otherwise, uncemented stems for me are quicker and they also allow me to get out of a situation where I have to use impaction grafting. The next question is, how will you reconstruct posterior wall in acetabulum? So if there is a deficiency of the posterior wall of the acetabulum in revision, you can either use an allograft femoral head, or you can use a bone graft and fix it with screws and use a plate on top of that, or you can use an augment, metal augment, the T-Mars augment. The Redapt augment is still not available for us to use, but it is beautiful. So how many encerclage wires are ideally recommended to close the ETO? At least 3 are required, one just about the ETO, one in the mid area, and one around the GT going through the lesser trochanter if it is possible. So the next question is my indications for using a cage or integrating cups as per the site of bone loss. So the cages are only used when I have type 4 bone loss from the Paprosky classification. So if we have a situation where you have pelvic discontinuity, then you need to use a cage. Otherwise, I'm going to mostly go with a Redapt cup, so advanced ingrowth surface cup, which will allow you to have a host contact of approximately 50% of host bone, which will allow you multiple screw fixation in the dome of the acetabulum as well as the posterior superior area, and also if possible 1 screw in the ischium and 1 screw in the pubis. Do they have a jumbo hole cup or a multi-hole cup? Yes, they have big shell. As far as I remember, it goes up to 68 or 70 diameter, and it has got a multi-hole option for you to use multiple screws. It also has locking screw option in the cup, which will give you fantastic grip of the cup. And the cup screw hole placement is much better than the competing cup like T-Mars, where the screw holes are clustered. So with Redapt, you get screw holes which are around the edge or the periphery, which will allow you to get better fixation in the acetabulum. So in case of revision situation with pelvic dissociation, what is your preference? Cup cage or any experience with the Redapt acetabulum revision shell with locking screws? So I have used Redapt acetabulum revision shell with locking screws with a cemented liner. Works extremely well. The only situation where I would not use it is when I need augments, because augments are still not available. Cup cage is my preferred method in pelvic dissociation. So I will have a T-Mars shell or a Redapt shell and then use a cage inside and then use a cemented liner inside. And the Redapt minimum offset is 33 millimeter, which is fantastic for a revision scenario. This is answered probably by one of the Smith & Nephew reps. So let me see where I was. Yeah. So difference between solution and Redapt. So quickly recap: solution or Echelon is made up of cobalt chrome. Redapt is made up of titanium. Any stem which is made up of cobalt chrome, because the modulus of elasticity is much higher as compared to the bone, will lead to thigh pain because they engage distally. Distal loading happens and they'll get thigh pain. Because they load distally and they are made up of cobalt chrome, they will lead to proximal stress shielding and bone loss. And intraoperative fracture risk is higher with a cobalt chrome stem. And Redapt is a conical stem, solution is a cylindrical stem. Redapt is a titanium stem, which the modulus of elasticity is closer to the bone. So thigh pain will be less, proximal stress shielding will be less, and it will hopefully promote bone formation in the proximal aspect. So these are the differences between a cobalt chrome stem and a titanium stem. Next question is, what is meant by bicontact stem? It is metadiaphyseal or mediolateral. So bicontact stem is a stem manufactured by B. Brown or Aesculap. The stem type is a type 3A. So if you know the classification of cementless stems, there are 6 types. So bicontact is like a snake hood, and it is a type 3A, which basically is mainly a metaphyseal fixation. It is not a metadiaphyseal fixation. In neck of femur scenario, will you recommend bigger diameter heads? So if you have done a hip replacement for fracture neck of femur, ideally you should use a dual mobility cup, a bipolar, or a large diameter head. There is no doubt about it because they tend to dislocate more. Next question is, do you prefer to use a mesh in acetabular defect, or would you prefer using a highly porous cup? I don't use a mesh. Mesh is mainly used for cemented cup revision using impaction grafting. So if you want to do a impaction grafting, you can put a mesh, cancellous bone can be impacted, and you can use a cemented cup. For me, I use a highly porous cup with advanced ingrowth surfaces, which will allow me to get contact with the host bone, fixation with additional screws, and if required, a cemented liner inside. Any precautions while putting a pubic screw? You probably need to use a C-arm, or you need to be pretty sure before you put in the screw, before you put in the cup, see with a depth gauge where the pubis is directed to, have an idea, start with a drill hole, don't go all the way, just make an opening drill hole into the direction of the pubis, use a depth gauge to see where the screw direction is and pass the screw in. And I wouldn't get a bicortical purchase with a pubic screw. The cup cage construct available with Smith & Nephew is the question. Yes, it is available. You can use a Redapt revision cup, and you can use a Smith & Nephew cage inside that cup, and then use a cemented liner inside it. Weight bearing protocol post ETO is toe touch weight bearing. Question was weight bearing protocol following ETO. It is touch weight bearing immediately a couple of days following the surgery for 6 weeks. Get an X-ray, make sure there is no subsidence. And if you repaired the ETO well, you can start partial weight bearing at 6 weeks and at full weight bearing at 3 months. Next question is, do you use Redapt sleeve femoral stem? No, because of the cost concerns, I don't use it. Next question is, how often do I use MRS Titan type of cup? I haven't used it. The theory seems to be very good. I have no experience of using that cup. Next question, while using a jumbo Redapt revision cup, any points on when to decide a cemented liner or a regular modular press fit liner? A Redapt revision cup does not come with a press fit liner. You always have to cement a liner inside it. So it's a revision cup, so there is no press fit liner. The next question is, do you prefer a dual mobility in revision scenarios? I keep it standby, but I don't always use it because it depends. Not all of the dual mobility cups have advanced ingrowth surfaces. So they may not be ideal shells to be used in revision scenario. So I would use a cup which can give me good press fit with advanced ingrowth surfaces with screw options, and then choose my bearing as a secondary thing. The next question is a good question. Redapt diameter starting from 12 millimeter, but Indian patient femur canals are narrow. So 12 millimeter is the widest part of the stem. So the distal part narrowing because of 3-degree taper is a very narrow part of the stem. So 12 millimeter is easily usable in Indian patients. So I would not worry about a 12 millimeter diameter Actually, it is much better. The Wagner starts at 14 millimeter. So 12 millimeter diameter is quite an ideal scenario for us. So looks like we have completed all the question and answers. And I think we have also overshot our time. So I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Smith & Nephew team.
Thank you so much, sir. So, I mean, we are through the time and they were fantastic questions, and thank you so much for answering all of them. But still, we would request if the viewers have any further questions, and if they feel that they are unanswered, or that there are more questions that they would ask Dr. Kulkarni, you can send them through the Smith & Nephew representative or email us on the Smith & Nephew Medical Education Team email ID. And we would request Dr. Kulkarni to help answer those queries, and we will get those answers back to you. Thank you so much, sir, again, for taking out time and enlightening us on the revision hip arthroplasty. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon with more and more education initiatives. So stay tuned and you will hear back more from us. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.